Everyone, welcome back to the Plague Warm Up, the podcast where we dive into the stories, people, and places driving the sporting event and tourism industry forward. I'm your host, Carrie Shields. Today, I'm joined by Glenn Mary, the CEO of Move United, the nation's leading community based adaptive sports organization. Glenn brings extensive experience from across the sports world, including his time as CEO of US Rowing, and now leads the growth and impact of Move United's national programs and events. Move United is changing the game for individuals with physical disabilities. From hallmark events like the Hartford Nationals, the Ski Spectacular, and the USA Wheelchair Football League, to serving as a pipeline to Team USA. With over 245 member organizations nationwide and recognition on Forbes' Accessibility 100 list, Move United is redefining what access and inclusion look like in sports. In this conversation, we'll talk with Glenn about the power of sports to transform lives, the role of destination partnerships to bring these events to life, and what's ahead for Move United. This was truly an incredible conversation, and the work they are doing to increase education and accessibility is incredible. And I'm truly honored to have had the chance to share more about the work this organization is doing. So I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Let's get into it. Nothing brings people together like sports, and no place brings people together like the beach, Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. There, you'll find first class facilities and an experienced planning team that will make sure your sporting or esports event goes off without a hitch. And when the games end, the real play begins. With 60 miles of endless activities and entertainment, it's a guaranteed win for all ages. That's why you can't beat the beach. Start planning at myrtlebeachsports.com. Glenn, welcome to the Plazy Warm Up podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me, Carrie. It's great to be here.
Yeah, of course. So, just to get started, you've had a fascinating career in sports leadership from the CEO of USA Rowing to now leading Move United. Could you take us through what inspired you to take this role and the experience into the adaptive sports world?
Oh, yeah. So I retired after 20 years with rowing. And while I was at rowing, we launched Paralympic rowing in 2002. Our first games was Beijing. And because of that, I had a limited experience kind of launching adaptive rowing across about 45 of our clubs in the US. So when I left rowing, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to mix the power of sport with some type of social outcome. And the opportunity came up at what was then Disabled Sport USA, and I kind of jumped at the chance. And really, fortunately, they hired me on in about 7 years ago now. And since I came on board, we've really focused on how to grow out the network and deepen the knowledge base of our adaptive sports leadership so that we're prepared when the Paralympics return to the United States in LA in 2028.
That's awesome. And just preparing for this conversation, it's incredible the work that you guys do. And it's so cool to see how much it's grown over the course of the last few years. And your leadership has been a big part of that. And so, for those who might not know Move United is and what you do, could you give a little bit of a background and introduction to the organization?
Yeah, so Move United uses the power of sport to push what's possible for people with physical disabilities. And what I mean by that is we meet athletes in community-based programs across the country. We're in 45 states. We now have 248 locations. And we present a menu of about 70 different sports that you can participate in, that you can compete in, that you can recreate in. And what we're trying to do is make it more familiar for people with disabilities that sport is for them. And on the flip side, to challenge America's misperceptions of what disability is and that people with disabilities should be doing sport. They should be doing day-to-day activities the way everyone else does, and that the disability shouldn't be a barrier. And so it's a really interesting nexus of a social movement paired up with sports is kind of that fulcrum point to leverage change.
That's incredible. And when you hear 70 sports, I'm still in awe of the amount of sports that are out there. Could you give people an idea of what kind of sports you're talking about?
Sure. And I mean, it runs just about every sport you can think of, right? Um, we have track and field. So you may have wheeled track athletes. You may have seated throwing athletes. We have a partnership with the NFL in 13 of their markets where we have wheelchair football, and it's just as hard hitting. It's not tackle, but the chairs come together and people crash and people catch touchdowns. Um, but then we also have a huge recreational and sport component where people are hiking and kayaking and canoeing and mountain biking. And for those who might be most restricted in their mobility, we have sports like bocce for power chairs, where you literally have athletes that are using puff and sip chairs, maneuvering around, positioning their bocce balls in a very strategic way so that they're winning these games of bocce, just like you'd see in the old Italian gardens in New York City where people are playing with the bocce balls. Same idea, but you're seated and you don't have the dexterity of your arms movements. You're holding the ballon underneath your neck and lifting up, and it's rolling down a ramp. So it really is a pretty wide menu of things. Recreationally, we have competitions, we have fierce competitions. And then we kind of have this adventure track where people do cool things like climb Mount Everest.
That's incredible. And you mentioned you are now a national network with over 245 member organizations. How do you approach uniting and supporting such a broad and diverse community?
That's a really excellent question because when I came on board, we had about 127 locations, and adaptive sport and the disability movement had a lot of different fiefdoms, whether it was disability specific or whether it was sport specific. And what we've tried to do is amplify everyone's voice by bringing everyone under the tent of Move United. And we did a brand change back in 2020, which kind of reflects that with our name change of moving together, uniting the movement, bringing motion and movement to people who typically may be sitting on a couch and not out doing sport. So all of those pieces have really attracted a different sort of energy about working together towards something. It didn't hurt that shortly after I joined the team here at Move United, we set off with what we call our Vision 2028. And that was kind of to capture this 10-year window before the Paralympics return to Los Angeles, not because we're about Paralympics, although most of the team comes through Move United programs at Team USA, but because it's a rally point. And I've seen that in my previous career. We were at 3 Paralympics with rowing and 5 Olympics that I got to go to and see in London, in Rio, in Beijing, how the community shifted their attitude towards people with disability, how people with disability shifted their attitude about what's possible using sport. And so we thought to ourselves, what would it take between 2019 and 2028 to leverage what we know is going to be a cultural impact and really prepare a network that could sustain the increased interest. And in that process, we've gone from 127 to 248 locations. We've added wheelchair football. We've changed kind of the brand and bringing everyone under one tent. And we've also created a whole education program that allows us to deepen our management and kind of professionalism in adaptive sport.
And could you speak a little bit more to that education piece? I know we'll get into the events you run, but I'm super curious as into how you provide that
Yeah.
education within, all of the states and organizations that you are in.
Yeah, it's super cool, actually. This is a byproduct of COVID, right? Like COVID hit, we were launching a new brand, we were launching wheelchair football, we were merging and acquiring another nonprofit, and all these things happened. And we were like, oh, we're not turning off the lights. We just have to find a different place to do it. So we started a platform for adaptive sports, and we would just aggregate content from our other partners, our other members. And as we did that, we started to think about, wow, there are some inconsistencies here and some opportunities to build on that. So how could we do that? And then a lot of the organizations were really trying to learn how to do things during COVID. So we started educating around how do you come forward in this digital space? How do you teach a sport when you don't have hands-on? And from that evolved our learning management system where people in the community can learn more about adaptive sport. where if you're part of the adaptive community, you can learn about specific sports. And that then evolved into what we had at the time was an annual meeting, our education conference, which was 180 people. This past year, we were in Park City and we had close to 500 individuals representing about 180 of our 248 organizations. And they're there because we're teaching and learning together, not just specifics around adaptive sport, but how to be better managers, how to be better fundraisers, how to make sure that our organizations are professional and well respected. So we're elevating what the entire community is doing, and we're introducing new sports like curveball came this year. I'd never seen curveball. That was kind of interesting. And so our education series continues to grow. This coming year in April, we'll be in Cape Cod for that same
Awesome.
conference that was in Park City last year, and we'll move it around. It's one of our 3 major properties that kind of float around the country and attract hundreds of like-minded people and athletes.
That's awesome. And you spoke to how many of your athletes, nearly 90% of Team USA Paralympians in 2022 had a connection to Move United. How
Yeah.
does your pipeline prepare those athletes for the Paralympic stage?
Well, it's an interesting history, right? Our organizations will celebrate our 70th year next year. And we started our DNA as really the 10th Mountain Division. Veterans from that group were teaching veterans returning from Vietnam and Korea how to ski. And that was the first time most of those individuals had been part of the adaptive sports movement. We predate Paralympics, actually. So back before there was a Paralympics and a Paralympic committee in the US, we were identifying athletes to go overseas and compete at the original and early stages of Paralympic sport internationally. So our role in that has always been part of our DNA. But as we've grown, what we find is we're our goal was that we would be nearby all Americans. And right now, 83% of Americans are within a 1-hour drive of one of our locations. So if you have a child or an uncle or an aunt or a brother or sister who wants to try adaptive sport, you can learn it in close to your backyard. If you really love it and you decide you want to compete, you can come to one of our competitions, and that's with a lowercase c, right? It's not Paralympic, but it's adjacent to that. And if you turn out to be really gifted in it and you have the drive and want to pursue it, you can end up becoming a Paralympian. And indeed, in the winter games, we were about 92%. In the summer games, we're in the high 60 percentile, like 67% of the athletes got their start or connected with a program or trained with one of our programs. So I just see that as, a little bit, we're like the YMCA or the Boys and Girls Club. We want to be everywhere so that people can sample, participate, and engage in sport. And hopefully they can follow their dreams wherever those lead.
Yeah, that's incredible. And you're just speaking everything towards the power of sport and bringing people together, no matter what level. And so, do you have a specific story of an athlete whose journey through Move United really captures that transformational power of sport?
It's funny. I don't focus on one individual. I think what I see is the scalability of this and how that's such an important metric that there are so many individuals. You can look at the sponsors of the Paralympics, the city athletes, city group athletes, the Hartford athletes. Most of them have been Move United athletes, and you'll hear fantastic stories about what they've accomplished. But what's really interesting is when you go to the Hartford Nationals, our US Nationals, which is a multi-sport event, and you see the families and some of the kids there for the first time. And they're still trying to figure out sometimes the right way to run down the course or the right way to wheel up to the starting line. And then you have the older people that have been there a couple times and they're sharing the information and the families come together and the parents are sharing information. It's a very unique system that doesn't exist right now in the able-bodied world. I have 2 children that are middle school and high school age, and they play youth sport, and it's powerful for them, right? But in this situation, often you're one athlete of one in your home community. But when you come together in our community-based programming or in one of our competitions, all of a sudden, there's other people that look like you, that roll around like you do, that have the same disability, shared experience, and the same goals. And it's really powerful. And that collective power, I think, is way more interesting to me as a leader and how we can continue to amplify and multiply that effect.
And that's amazing. And I recently went to a Special Olympics event, and it was one of the first times you're really able to. And I have a niece, my goddaughter has Down syndrome. And so just uh, how excited and I guess it means so much to be able to be a part of a community that is so inclusive and bringing people together. And I know that she'll be at the Special Olympics one day. But what you're speaking to is just something that I think is far beyond us as individuals, and having the power of sports to do so is really incredible. And means a lot to me and my family personally, and I'm sure it means the same to you guys. And so to speak towards some of your events, you spoke about the educational event you will have next year in Cape Cod, but every year you host a national event, and there is an RFP
Yeah.
that is out right now for your 2027, 2028 nationals. Could you speak to what you look for in a city and destination partner for that national event?
Absolutely. So this event is a multi-sport event. We have sports ranging from archery and shooting to swimming and track and field. The swimming and track and field are kind of the marquee events. Most of the athletes are there for that. But what you find is a lot of athletes are sampling across those events in triathlon or powerlifting or tennis, or maybe they're trying for the first time a new sport. And what we look for in a partner are a few things. One is it's extraordinarily expensive to have a physical disability. It just is. You're behind the eight ball all the time. So we're looking for an affordability partner that can make sure that it's in a location that's easy to get to, that the hotel room rates and venues are accessible, that they offer good value, that the community has some awareness of disability. We're happy to come in where perhaps that isn't as strong as the community would like, and we're happy to come in and help build that. But it certainly goes a long way if the community has some experience. We also like to partner with uh, locations that perhaps one of our 248 members are in, because they can help on a day-to-day basis with either that familiarity with disability or just kind of being the point person on a day-to-day basis when there's kind of refreshers and kind of sharing culture and learned experiences. All of that comes together into I don't even know how many pages it is. My competition team takes care of the bid process, but we end up with typically a half a dozen or so qualified locations that are interested in hosting, and then we go through a process of kind of winnowing it down to two finalists, and then we kind of go out into the field and see exactly what do the venues look like, what's the quality of the track, how's the pool, how are the accommodations. There's the disability community, although the ADA is more than 30 years old, there are still so many properties, whether it's universities and schools or hotels and restaurants, where they meet the letter of the law, but it's not an inclusive design or a universal design. And therefore, it creates barriers that are difficult for some of those who have less mobility to find their way around. And we want this to be an experience where they feel welcome. It's an inclusive event. We want our athletes and their families to feel like, yeah, the community gets it. So we have, about seven of our staff that have visible physical disabilities. I have several Paralympians on my staff. I have several veterans on my staff, and they participate in these site visits because they have firsthand experience and can kind of scope out, this is going to be an issue, that's not going to be an issue.
And so, are there any bare minimum requirements from a city to host when it comes to that accessibility piece? And are there any ways that your organization is educating on what a venue has to have when it comes to hosting an event like yours?
Yeah, absolutely. We encourage groups that are interested in hosting to reach out ahead and have a conversation with us so we can walk you through that familiarity, and to ensure that you kind of have an understanding of what you may be getting into. With that said, The basic requirements are kind of, X number of hotel room, you know, so many that are ADA accessible. What do the track surfaces look like? How old are they? Same with the pool. What's the size? Where's the practice site? Those types of things. And those are all included in our written RFP request form.
It's amazing. We just hosted our first conference and going through our 2026 bid now. And just the importance of that destination partnership is becoming even
Yeah,
more evident than I knew before. And a lot of it is just the openness of collaboration and ideas to make that event experience as great as
right.
possible for those participants and spectators coming into your event. Could you speak to the importance of that destination partnership?
Oh, this is kind of new for us. So the competition series came about through a merger between Disabled Sport USA and Adaptive Sport USA back in 2020, and we emerged together as Move United. So some of my experience working in rowing came about, and let's kind of professionalize this and start working with destinations to make them aware of what we're doing. So we go to several of the professional conferences and um, some of them I know folks for years, right? Some of the destinations I've known for years. And it's really making them aware that we're there and ensuring that they understand there's an economic impact that we have. We're there for a 10-day stretch of about 500 athletes, about another 160 coaches and support staff, and then all the families. So we're generating $2 to $3 million in economic impact that it's not a huge event. We recognize we're not the NCAA Final Four, but at the same time, we're trying to bring our game up where we're treating these processes in a more professional way and working with the destinations, the sports commissions, that type of um, thing to kind of ensure that everyone is benefiting from this.
Yeah. And you just finished the Hartford Nationals in Grand Rapids. I believe you set a record with over 420 athletes.
Yeah.
What made this year so special, and what momentum are you hoping carries forward into your next year's event?
Yeah. So our events are on a 2-year bid cycle. So we'll be back at Grand Rapids next year, which I think no matter how prepared you are for our community, there's learnings that take place, right? And especially because we do it near the end of July when it's typically hot and humid wherever you are. But, Grand Rapids, I knew because rowing had hosted Masters championships there more than a decade ago when I was at rowing. And we got to speaking. I was at a conference there, got to speaking with the destination, and we were like, we've got this chapter there. We think it could be a really cool synergy. We had been down in Alabama the year before and out in Denver the 2 years before that. So we'd been in kind of warm climate locations, and not to say Michigan's cold, but it's cooler, let's say, than
Yeah.
than the South. So it was an easy drive for a lot of our athletes and their families, which is another element you have to think about. You're not bringing a pair of running shoes and a suitcase. You're bringing often a wheelchair or standing equipment. So they're packing them in the back of SUVs or trucks or small trailers. So it was, I think, a reflection of a good choice going through the bid process. Grand Rapids is well known for their hospitality, and it's also the geography of it lent itself towards a lot of folks traveling in by car, which was great and resulted in a record amount of people there this year.
That's incredible. And what were some of those lessons that you learned from hosting this summer?
Wow. That's actually one. So we're a small organization. Okay. We're about 24 staff. I get to drive the equipment trailer from Maryland to wherever we're hosting. So I personally learned the distance and the toll costs to go from Maryland to Michigan. But I think the learnings with Michigan were just how great it was to be on a college campus and to utilize Calvin University has relatively new track. Their pool facility is fantastic. They're really great in bringing volunteers forward. The Grand Rapids folks did a great job in leveraging their experience with sports they were just wrapping up a big national pickleball tournament. And so their volunteers did kind of back-to-back weeks of volunteering. And that was impressive. What I took, my takeaway was it's a great place to go for an event. And they were well prepared for the sports community.
Michigan Sports Commission as a whole has been unbelievable to work with, and I know the team at Grand Rapids is great. And so I'm excited to see what comes for 2026. And so another big event that you have is the USA Wheelchair Football League that kicks off in Chicago soon. For those who may not have seen it, how would you describe this event?
Um, so this series of tournaments that we just wrapped up in Chicago, and we have 3 tournaments this year. It is hard-hitting football. Like, we have a pretty strong veteran community in there. Several hundred veterans play in the league across 13 teams. The partnership started through a Salute to Service grant with the NFL and our partners at Bob Woodruff Foundation. And we literally launched this announcement. I think it was 2 weeks into COVID. That's how fresh it was. We were at the draft that they were doing during COVID. And it was just crazy to see this sport take off. I had no idea how many people were waiting to play football, American football. I mean, we have wheelchair soccer, we have wheelchair lacrosse, we have rugby, but there is a group of people that just love football in the United States, right? It's the most popular sport. And what you see is this is on a paved surface. It's not on the grass. You need the chairs to be able to roll. They're using sport chairs that are welded very well so that they don't break apart. People are going out for passes. People are diving forward and sometimes coming out of their chairs. Sometimes people come slamming together. Quarterbacks can throw. We're talking about like a 70-yard pass in some cases, and it's quick paced. So we in the last 6 years have kind of put the rules together. We've put together where the tournaments are. We've had some great opportunities with the NFL. They've been fantastic partners in having us at the draft for a few years and do games there. We did a showcase at the Super Bowl in New Orleans this past year with our veterans teams, where we brought veterans from each of the teams and formed kind of 2 super teams. And really what is so remarkable to me is we'll have NFL players stop in to say hello, and they're like, "We didn't understand this was like physical. The physicality of this is real." And you're like, "Yep." We had a lot of conversations. I remember we were at a hotel ballroom in Baltimore at the BWI airport, and we were talking about the rules, and there was a very short debate over what kind of sport do we want this to be. And the players that were there and the coaches that were there that had been players or in other wheelchair sports were like, this needs to be hard hitting. This needs to be physical. It needs to represent what football is when you're playing from a chair. And that was exactly what it's come to be. And it's a great sport. We have that RFP will go back up. We do it every couple of years. But we were just in Chicago last week, and we'll be in Phoenix this coming week, I think it is. And Phoenix has hosted before, and they've done a great job. So we're looking forward to being back there.
That's incredible. And I think one thing you guys do a great job of was I stalked all of your social media and videos leading up to this conversation, and it really opened my eyes. You said the physicality of some
Yeah.
of these sports, but that one definitely got me. For I was not expecting that time, that intensity, but it was really cool to see, and I highly recommend checking out your TikTok and your
Well,
YouTube.
the best
And
part of the photos and video for that is that Tim Brown, who's on our staff, is a veteran and uses a wheelchair himself. But he plays rugby, and you've just never seen someone who has such a aggressiveness to his play in rugby. As a triple amputee, he's out there pushing his chair, and when he's with the camera, you see him like in his chair, out of his chair, on the floor, getting all these angles with a long lens. And you're just like, man, it puts me to shame. I'm like, I'm tired at the end of the day. And this guy's like bouncing everywhere. It's great. Tim does a great job with our photography and videography.
Oh, that's awesome. And there's another big signature event that you guys have, the Ski Spectacular, coming up in December. What makes that such a signature celebration of adaptive sports?
So ski spec is unique in that we don't move it around. And we've been in Breckenridge for coming up on 35 years. And we've had the Hartford as our partner with this event for more than 32 of those years. So, um, this is the largest winter sports festival in the country and probably in the world. We bring together 850 people to learn how to ski, snowboard, do Nordic. Um, Sometimes we do curling, sometimes we do sled hockey. We do everything from recertifying instructors so that they have the most up-to-date current safety standards and teaching standards to learn to ski and snowboard. Some folks have never seen snow before, and maybe they're just wrapping up their rehabilitation therapy at Walter Reed or Brooke Army Medical, and they're coming out with one of our veterans groups. And by the end of the week, not only have they learned how to ski or snowboard, but they're racing. The final days of the week, we have a small race up on the hill. It has a lot of social interaction. The activation with our partners there of the Hartford is unique to anything that I've ever seen in my 35 years in Olympic and Paralympic sport marketing and partnership. And I say that because no one leaves that event not being affected by what they see. And it's not that we're looking for an emotional response. What we're looking for is for people's attitudes to change, for the visibility of what's possible, and for the challenge to these preconceived notions of not just can this person come down a hill in a monoski, but if they can do that, shouldn't we be employing them and having them work for our company? Shouldn't we be engaging them in society? Shouldn't we have inclusive design, universal design, so that people don't have to roll around to the back of a restaurant to come through?
And that's why, I mean, education is such a big piece of what you do. And what role do you think that that knowledge sharing plays in moving the industry forward?
Well, we're optimistic that it's making a big change. We developed in 2020, 2021, something that we call the Inclusive Playbook. And it's an opportunity to get in front of elementary school age kids in the phys ed space and talk about inclusive design, universal design for sport, right? So when you're playing volleyball, you could be playing seated volleyball, and then people who can't stand can be seated and playing with you. We have kind of a children's activity book that goes with it and a whole structure for teachers to be able to use this. And we've had pretty good success in rolling this out over the last 5 years. It's reached more than 300,000 youth. And that is kind of at the basis of changing children's attitude about including their friends in play, because that's where we all start with sport, right? It's the hopscotch, the two square, throwing the ball back and forth, going out on the court. And with some adaptation, your friends, all of them, can participate with you. Now, as we age that up, what we see is there are athletes who would like to be involved in high school sport, and they're still learning how to participate at our adaptive sports clubs, but there's only 248 of those. So if your high school doesn't have adaptive track and field, but you want to roll and do the 100 meters, how do you do that? Well, we've been working with Gatorade over the last 3 years to create a library of helping high school coaches understand when I have an athlete roll up to me or come up to me and say, hey, I look different than other people. I can still do these things. Can you coach me and help me compete? The answer is yes, that there's guidebooks that we've created across 3 or 4 sports right now, and the library will continue to grow over the coming years. But those types of resources and education around the American public and getting them more familiar with the disability community, I think it's really powerful. It has the most opportunity for change. The more that people see others with disability, we represent 13% of the population has a physical disability. Something like 24% of the population has some form of disability. How many people in your day-to-day life have a disability? How many times do we see someone with a disability? It's not that often. A lot of people live in isolation. And to kind of think back to the time of COVID when all of us were in isolation, right? And personalizing that for the abled community in they couldn't participate in team sport. They couldn't go out and do the things they wanted to outdoors or in community or communal areas. Like that's part of our day-to-day existence as a person with disability. So that was a really important time period when we were launching all of these other pieces that helped influence. I think there were a lot more Americans that saw what we were doing saying, yeah, I didn't care for that experience. I wouldn't want that to be part of my day to day. And you're like, and you know what? It doesn't have to be. Like there are opportunities to do sport. And through sport, learn how to do other things, learn how to find a job. If you want to have a career that requires a college degree, you're more likely to go to college if you've done adaptive sport. Once you get your college degree, if you want a career where you're advancing, you're more likely to have that happen if you're doing it through adaptive sport because you're learning things like socialization. You're learning how to be a team player. You're learning what hard work takes to create an outcome. And we all know that already. Those of us who have been involved in sport all of our lives, like that's the model. We already have drunk that Kool-Aid. And now the disability community is beginning to understand it. And the academic research is there that supports it and sustains it. The quality of life for adults with disabilities who are doing adaptive sport is multiples higher than those who don't. And that's across similar disabilities. We're not taking apples and comparing with oranges. We're saying like, if you're active, if you're around other people doing things, like, is your life better? And the research is showing it is. That's powerful, man. That's the power of sport, right?
Yep. It's incredibly powerful. And I think that optimism of the work that you guys are doing is warranted because it's clear you're making a big difference. And you recently were acknowledged as Forbes on the Forbes Accessibility 100 list. So, what did that recognition mean to you and your team and your partners?
What it means to me is that America is beginning to understand what we've been saying all along, that disability groups should be recognized, that we should be part of society, that there's an opportunity to advance things. And it's great to be among the list of a lot of colleagues and organizations that are far greater than us and do great work. It's great to be part of that community. And I think at Move United, we try to be humble. Like we like to do the work. We're not so good about tooting our own horn. We kind of took it in stride and we're like, you know what we have to do today? We've got like 20 clinics that have to go on. So like we kept rolling through it, but that's a little bit, that's who we are. We're a scrappy band of staff, people with disabilities, veterans, professionals in the field for decades coming together to kind of leverage things forward. And it's nice to be recognized, but we also realize that the biggest recognition is like, what if we had a 500,000 people instead of 125,000 people in network? Like, that'd be pretty cool. What if we meet our goal of 90% of the country being within a 50-mile drive? We're going to hit that because we started at 50 and we're at 80 something right now. So like, we're making progress. We're doing the progress because we like the outcomes. We like to see more people active. We like to see more people healthy. We like to see less of our veterans suffering from depression. We like to see the positives that sports bring.
And this has been an incredible conversation, and just hearing about your journey has been extremely eye opening and exciting because I want to be a part of that community. And I know our organization at Play Easy is happy to play a very small role in helping to expand into new places. But what for you personally has been the biggest lesson that you've learned through this journey?
Uh, you know, I think I learned that there's so much opportunity and possibility that I didn't really realize. Like, if you put your shoulder into this space, if you push and have a direction and a vision of what you'd like to accomplish, there are a lot of like-minded people that come in and say, how can we help? And that's a enormously powerful environment to work in. And I'd be
That's
remiss if I didn't say the team, they're remarkable at Move United. They just are.
that's awesome. And finally, if you could leave listeners with one message about the power of adaptive sports and inclusion, what would it be?
I think it's the power of inclusion. It's the power of being part of something bigger. And if you're listening to this podcast, you likely already know how great sport is. So just think about that. If you had a disability, how much greater that impact can be to take you off your couch in the isolation of your home and put you into a community of people that are just like you, and the power that that brings in addition to what you're already benefiting from in sport. That's just amazing to see how that leverages change to something really positive.
Love it. Well, Glenn, this has been such a pleasure getting to talk to you, learning more about Move United. And so, if anyone listening is interested in learning more, getting involved,
Oh, yeah.
potentially hosting one of your events, what is the best way to get in touch with you and your organization?
Yeah, so our, our web address is easy to remember. It's moveunitedsport.org. Um, I'm easy to Google. My last name's Mary, like Merry Christmas. So if you look for Glenn Mary, you're going to find an email address at moveunitedsport.org, and I'm happy to respond to you. If you're a host city or a destination and you think this is something that's for you, it probably is because you're already thinking that it is. So reach out to me. I'll put you in touch with the correct staff. There's only 24 of us there, so it's not like you're going to deal with the bureaucracy.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, Glenn, thanks so much for taking the time. This has been such a joy.
My pleasure, Carrie. Thanks so much for having me and letting me ramble on about Movie Night. It's more than a passion, and it's really just a fantastic group of people to work with.
Yeah. Well, believe me, I would have let you ramble on more. I loved hearing about it. We'll have to have you on again.
All right.
But thanks everyone. Until next time. Bye.
Cheers.